It's week 2 of the NFL, and we give you our best 3 bets for this Sunday, and it all starts right now. Hey guys, it's Matt from GrandstandBetters.com, and we give you our best 3 bets for week number 2 in the NFL. But make sure first you hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss any of our free picks, predictions, and contests throughout the NFL season. And while you're at it, smash that like button if you are ready to watch another full Sunday of NFL football. So, without further ado, let's dive into week 2 and let's take a look at the first matchup between the Houston Texans and the Denver Broncos. That is at 4:25 p.m. Eastern Time. And the Broncos are favored by 9.5 points, and the over-under is set at 45.5. Now, the Texans, they are coming off a tie to the Colts, in which, honestly, they should see as a loss. Houston was up in that game 20-3 entering the fourth quarter and blew that lead. If it wasn't for Blankenship missing the field goal in overtime, they would have lost outright. For the first 3 quarters of that game, the Houston Texans actually didn't look half bad behind Davis Mills, and their defense, despite giving up a total of 517 yards to the Colts, did do well on 3rd and 4th down situations, as the Colts were only 6 for 16. Now, that is one area we are going to be watching for this matchup with the Denver Broncos, who themselves last Monday went 8 for 16 in the similar situations. Now, an area of concern, though, for Texans fans is that Mills only went 23 for 37, but he did go through his progressions well. He targeted 11 different receivers, with Brandon Cooks being his favorite. Cooks had 7 catches for 82 yards and averaged 11 yards per catch. Now, things might be different this week, as the Broncos secondary did a nice job, with the exception of maybe 2 pass plays last week, on limiting Geno Smith on throwing vertical down the field, despite Geno actually going for 23 of 28 passes. And speaking of those Broncos, it was not a great homecoming for Wilson or the Broncos, as they lost 17-16 despite putting up 433 total yards of offense, including Wilson throwing for 340 yards and a touchdown. Their rushing attack was also great. They averaged as a team over 5 yards per carry. Defensively, though, they were not half bad either. They held Geno Smith to under 200 yards passing, and their run defense limited the backfield of Seattle to only 62 yards on the ground. So you have to ask yourself, what was the problem? Well, the problem was fumbling the ball on the 1-yard line twice in the second half. It was embarrassing, and on top of that, the Broncos could not punch the ball in on goal-to-go situations. They actually had 10 snaps goal-to-goal on 3 different possessions, where they only got 3 points out of that. So, what's our best bet in this game? Well, last week the Texans almost won a game they had no business winning, and the Broncos lost a game they literally fumbled away. What a great week to welcome the NFL back into our lives, right? Now, the Broncos and Russell Wilson are a far better team than the Texans, and Mills and Houston, who just gave up 161 rushing yards to Jonathan Taylor, they're going to be giving up more yards on the ground to Williams and Gordon this week. Add in Texans secondary struggling out of the gate. Russell Wilson and this offense should be able to put up 30 points. So with our first pick of week number 2 in the NFL, we're going to take the Denver Broncos minus 9.5 points over the Texans. Just please, Broncos, hold on to the football. Now, the second game we're going to look at here on Sunday in Week 2 is going to be between the Atlanta Falcons and the LA Rams matchup in the 4 p.m. time slot. Rams, 9.5-point favorites, and the over-under set at 46.5 at the moment. Falcons, like the Texans, have to be kicking themselves, as they held a 26-10 lead in the fourth quarter last week against the Saints. But Jameis Winston and the Saints found a way to put Lutz in field goal range and a dagger in the Falcons fans' hearts. Marcus Mariota didn't look half bad in this game. Very similar to the style of play Geno Smith has. Mariota threw for 215 yards, but had a nice added rushing attack, picking up 72 yards on the ground and averaging 6 yards per carry. Now, he and rookie Drake London also hooked up for 5 receptions and 74 yards, and the Falcons must be excited to see that rookie get out to a great start. The rushing attack also for the Falcons was phenomenal. As we mentioned, Mariota did well, but Cordell Patterson had 22 carries for 120 yards, giving the Falcons over 200 yards rushing on the ground in that game. The Falcons will probably look to keep a balanced attack going this week, as the Rams did give up 121 rushing yards to the Bills on opening night. So, let's talk about the defending Super Bowl champions. Things definitely did not go the way they wanted it to go on opening night versus the Bills. They lost 31-10 and looked awful. Super Bowl hangover, maybe. Something else, also maybe. Stafford went 29 for 41 for 240 yards and had 3 interceptions, but let's be fair, a couple of those interceptions were on his receivers. The rushing game was awful. Henderson was the leading back with 13 carries for 47 yards, just averaging 3.6 yards per carry. What surprised us the most in that game is Cam Akers' night, or lack thereof, as he just had 3 touches for 0 yards. Now, Cooper Kupp started slow, but did end up with a great night, 13 receptions for 128 yards and a touchdown, but the Bills showed us something. If you'll allow Kupp to be the only one that does anything on that team, the team's going to struggle. The defense, they didn't do any better, the LA Rams. 413 yards total they gave up to the Bills. They could not contain Diggs and Davis, as those two combined for 12 receptions and over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. So what is our best bet for this matchup here in week 2 between the Falcons and the Rams? Well, Atlanta Falcons, honestly, they impressed us a little last week as they jumped out to a big lead, and regardless of how they ended that game, the only thing they proved is that they can run the football. The one thing, though, that the Falcons don't have is Diggs and Davis, and although London has still looked good here after 1 week of his NFL career, remember, he still is a rookie. This secondary of the Rams, they have had 10 days to dwell on what happened in week 1, and we think they're going to stifle Mariota and that Falcons passing attack and force Atlanta to beat them on the ground. And guess what? Aaron Donald and that front 7, they also have had 10 days to think about how they let up over 120 yards rushing against them. So with our best bet for week number 2, our second best bet for the week, we're going to take the Rams minus 9.5 over the Atlanta Falcons. Now, we have one more pick in week number 2. And before we get to that, just a reminder that you can get our entire NFL and college football plays over on our Patreon page. Join the community today. The link's in the description. We look forward to having you all be a part of our family. But we do have one last game we're looking at on Sunday. It is at 4 p.m., and it's between the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. 49ers, 8.5-point favorites here. Over-under set at 40.5 points at the moment. And as we mentioned earlier, the Seahawks stunned the Broncos last Monday night. But again, it was very fluke-like because the Broncos fumbled twice on the goal line. And even with that, the Seahawks could only win by 1 point. Geno, though, has managed the games well that he's played in recently, including that one where he went 23 of 28 and threw for 195 yards and a touchdown. And he utilized every receiver that he could, passing to 8 different ones. The one area of concern that we do have, and we mentioned this earlier, is his ability to throw vertically. For instance, DK Metcalf had 7 catches, but only for 36 yards. But we did see on his touchdown pass to Disley, if he can get outside of the pocket and get those linebackers to have to worry about him running, then that's going to create space for him to throw the ball, and he could be successful. Now, the Seahawks rushing game will help relieve some of that stress off of Smith, too, if Penny, who is now their featured back after Chris Carson retired, can continue to average 5 yards per carry. It's going to be interesting to see what game plan the Seahawks go with this week against the 49ers team, who has a good secondary. Now, that secondary, that held Justin Fields last week to only 121 yards passing. But speaking of San Francisco and last week's game against the Chicago Bears, can we really take anything from how it played out with the weather conditions at Soldier Field? 49ers, they ended up losing 19-10 to the Bears after they led the whole game up until the fourth quarter, and Trey Lance really struggled, going 13 of 28 for only 164 yards through the air. 49er fans are already chanting Jimmy G to start this week, but again, with the weather conditions, let's give Trey Lance a little bit of a break there. Jennings was his lead receiver with 4 catches for 62 yards, but honestly, again, tough to break down the passing game with the rain. Now, the rushing game for the 49ers, that was outstanding as they rushed for 176 total yards as a team. They should look to exploit the Seahawks defense as they allowed Gordon and Williams to average over 5 yards a carry. So what's our best bet in this one? Well, honestly, the 49ers front office, if Trey Lance has not performed, they're going to hear the screams from the crowd for Garoppolo, especially with the high expectations that many of them had, or many media people had, for the 49ers this season. Honestly, on a side note, we're a bit confused on why everybody was so high with this team with Trey Lance at quarterback, but hey, that's neither here nor there. The Seahawks, they had an emotional ride on Monday night, and we've seen Geno be a game manager with an ability to put up a couple touchdowns every game and let the defense do the rest. So it wouldn't surprise us here if Seattle puts up another 17 points, but what we're focused on is the fact that in bad conditions, 3 of the 49ers receivers averaged over 15 yards per catch. Now, yes, it is set to rain the morning of this game, but again, we think things are going to be a little different this week and not as bad. And Trey Lance and that rushing attack, they're going to open up the playbook and find success against a bad Seattle rush D and secondary. With both teams putting up some points on the board this week, we think they made this total way too low, even though the 49ers are going to use the clock rushing a little bit. Look for Lance to set up some play action and throw a couple bombs to set up some quick scores. So with our third and final pick for week number 2 in the NFL, we're going to take the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers over 40.5 points. Well, that does it for us here at Grandstand Bettors. As always, we want you to sit back. We want you to relax. Enjoy week 2 of the NFL. And we'll see you for our Monday night free picks coming out Monday afternoon. And it is a doubleheader. So stay tuned and have a great football weekend.